And that's one of the things he talked about with so many people that they did counseling on, is many of the people, when bad behaviors came out or maladaptive behaviors came out, it was because they were repressing so much. It's this whole thing. Like, he did some marriage counseling, and he talked about some of the hardest cases where the man and the woman or whatever were basically goody two shoes, like all the way up until they got married, and then they never had that feeling of freedom, right? And then 10 or 15 years later, they got to get it out. They got to be free. And then again, everything explodes. When you want to be free and you're 20, as long as you don't get an STD or get addicted to drugs, it's not too bad. When you want to be free, when you got 2 kids and you got a mortgage and you got a house and you got dogs and you got spouses, right? But the human brain wants to do what the human brain wants to do, and so that's my concern with all these things that keep people in work for so long. Is, again, and don't get me wrong, I mean, this is the tech field. Sometimes you got to put in 16 hours days, 30 days in a row. But do you really got to do it 31 days in a row? Do you really got to do it 60 days in a row? Do you really got to do it a year in a row? Because then you start running into all of these other ancillary issues. So that's why I don't believe in alcohol, and that's why I don't believe in some of this decompression stuff. Because again, it's not that I don't believe in decompressing, but get the hell out. Again, like I say, one of my issues is with some of these escapes, or where the company retreats. Again, it's the same thing where the company gives you this vacation or whatever, gets a cool experience, but you're still trapped within that company environment. And do you get to get out just to kind of flush out your brain? And so that kind of thing. That's why I get nervous about a lot of these. Just a lot of these ancillary, these benefits, as I would argue that they're not actually benefits. They seem really cool, like on the face of it, they seem really cool. But I would say, it seems like these companies have smart people, and it's like, if you start thinking about it a little bit, I would question if it's really a good idea. Now, then there's other benefits that do just make a hell of a lot of sense, and I don't really see how you could see a lot of downside. Things like company-supported childcare. Right? Now I do like, was it Better Off Ted? Viridian Dynamics. I don't know if you watched that show. I think that was the best. That was the best comedy ever. I have seen that show. There was only 2 seasons, and wasn't many episodes per season, but I've seen like every episode like 20 times. I just laugh my ass off. But anyways, they have a whole thing in there with Viridian Dynamics, and the company offers childcare. And offering childcare, they then try to get into the kids' brains and do weird things. With things like childcare, I guess you do kind of sort of have to worry about, what is the company actually indoctrinating your kid with. That is a concern, but it's not a huge concern, right? If you have a kid, if you have a 4-year-old and the kid needs childcare, the sad reality is you're going to be picking childcare based off of what you can afford, what's closest to you, what works, what does the kid like. So if the company just wants to provide you childcare, again, you need childcare anyway. So if you can literally go to work, drop the kid off, do your job, come out, there are some things you have to be a little careful about. Does having childcare right there with you mean that you then end up start working 12 hours a day because you don't feel like you have to deal with your kid? That's its issue. But on the other hand, if you can keep a pretty sane work personal life, it can be very, very nice because you don't have to do the additional commute. You don't have to drive 15 minutes out of your way, drop the kid off, pick the kid. So things like that kind of make sense, and that's where I would argue the whole idea of offering free lunches, if your kind of company can't afford it. It really does actually make sense. And again, it goes down to that whole thing of what your company can afford. Because let me tell you, those lunch bills can get stupidly expensive. You know what I'm saying? You get 20 people all ordering a decent lunch. Because that's one of the things too, is if you are going to be ordering lunch, what I would argue with any of these fringe benefits, you don't have to do gourmet. You don't have to get gourmet, but you do have to do good. You got to do good, right? You can't do if you're offering your employees the lowest level crap food, grade C food, they're not going to be that appreciative. And that's one thing a lot of companies don't think about, is they're like, we are going to give our employees something, and then the employees get it, and then the employees are snarky about it, and then the company, the manager is like, oh, these people, they're not appreciative of anything. It's like, no, it's not that they're not appreciative of anything, but basically you just try to pawn off the cheapest garbage you could find on them, and they weren't appreciative of the cheapest garbage you could find. And then that's the worst part for the company is, the money you spend on garbage is still money spent. You know what I'm saying? Like, if it costs $300, let's say, to feed your department good food that they'll be happy with, then you spend that $300, and it is $300, but your department is now happy. Versus if you spend $150 on pretty crap food, that $150 is still gone. Still gone, still spent, right? But